Day 124. 1 Kings 16-18. Then the word of the Lord came to Jehu son of Hanani against Baasha, saying, Even though I lifted you out of the dust and made you ruler over my people Israel, you have walked in the way of Jeroboam and have caused my people Israel to sin and to provoke me to anger by their sins. So now I will consume Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like that of Jeroboam son of Nebat. Anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in the city will be eaten by dogs, and anyone who dies in the field will be eaten by the birds of the air. As for the rest of the acts of Baasha, along with his accomplishments and might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Baasha rested with his fathers and was buried in Tirzah, and his son Elah reigned in his place. Moreover, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Jehu son of Hanani against Baasha and his house, because of all the evil he had done in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger with the work of his hands and becoming like the house of Jeroboam. And also because Baasha had struck down the house of Jeroboam. In the 26th year of Asa's reign over Judah, Elah son of Baasha became king of Israel, and he reigned in Tirzah 2 years. However, while Elah was in Tirzah getting drunk in the house of Arza the steward of his household there, Elah's servant Zimri, the commander of half his chariots, conspired against him. So in the 27th year of Asa's reign over Judah, Zimri went in, struck Elah down, and killed him. And Zimri reigned in his place. As soon as Zimri began to reign and was seated on the throne, he struck down the entire household of Baasha. He did not leave a single male, whether a kinsman or friend. So Zimri destroyed the entire household of Baasha, according to the word that the Lord had spoken against Baasha through Jehu the prophet. This happened because of all the sins Baasha and his son Elah had committed and had caused Israel to commit, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger with their worthless idols. As for the rest of the acts of Elah, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? In the 27th year of Asa's reign over Judah, Zimri reigned in Tirzah for 7 days. Now the troops were encamped against Gibbethon of the Philistines, and the people in the camp heard that Zimri had not only conspired but had also struck down the king. So there in the camp that very day, all Israel proclaimed Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel. Then Omri and all the Israelites marched up from Gibbethon and besieged Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the city was captured, he entered the citadel of the royal palace and burned it down upon himself. So he died because of the sins he had committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord and following the example of Jeroboam and the sin he had committed and had caused Israel to commit. As for the rest of the acts of Zimri and the treason he committed, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? At that time the people of Israel were divided, half of the people supported Tibni son of Ginath as king, and half supported Omri. But the followers of Omri proved stronger than those of Tibni son of Ginath. So Tibni died and Omri became king. In the 31st year of Asa's reign over Judah, Omri became king of Israel, and he reigned 12 years, 6 of them in Tirzah. He bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver and built a city there, calling it Samaria after the name of Shemer, who had owned the hill. But Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord and acted more wickedly than all who were before him. For he walked in all the ways of Jeroboam son of Nebat and in his sins, which he caused Israel to commit, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger with their worthless idols. As for the rest of the acts of Omri, along with his accomplishments and the might he exercised, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Omri rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria, and his son Ahab reigned in his place. In the 38th year of Asa's reign over Judah, Ahab son of Omri became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 22 years. However, Ahab son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord, more than all who were before him. And as if it were not enough for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, he even married Jezebel the daughter of Ethbaal king of the Sidonians, and he then proceeded to serve and worship Baal. First, Ahab set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he had built in Samaria. Then he set up an Asherah pole. Thus Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel before him. In Ahab's days, Hiel the Bethelite rebuilt Jericho. At the cost of Abiram his firstborn he laid its foundation, and at the cost of Segub his youngest he set up its gates, according to the word that the Lord had spoken through Joshua son of Nun. Now Elijah the Tishbite, who was among the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab, As surely as the Lord lives, the God of Israel before whom I stand, there will be neither dew nor rain in these years except at my word. Then a revelation from the Lord came to Elijah, leave here, turn eastward, and hide yourself by the brook of Cherith, east of the Jordan. And you are to drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So Elijah did what the Lord had told him, and he went and lived by the brook of Cherith, east of the Jordan. The ravens would bring him bread and meat in the morning and evening, and he would drink from the brook. Some time later, however, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, Get up and go to Zarephath of Sidon, and stay there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. So Elijah got up and went to Zarephath. When he arrived at the city gate, there was a widow gathering sticks. Elijah called to her and said, Please bring me a little water in a cup, so that I may drink. And as she was going to get it, he called to her and said, Please bring me a piece of bread. But she replied, As surely as the Lord your God lives, I have no bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. Look, I am gathering a couple of sticks to take home and prepare a meal for myself and my son, so that we may eat it and die. Do not be afraid, Elijah said to her. Go and do as you have said. But first make me a small cake of bread from what you have, and bring it out to me. Afterward, make some for yourself and your son, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, The jar of flour will not be exhausted and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain upon the face of the earth. So she went and did according to the word of Elijah. And there was food every day for Elijah and the woman and her household. The jar of flour was not exhausted and the jug of oil did not run dry, according to the word that the Lord had spoken through Elijah. Later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill, and his sickness grew worse and worse, until no breath remained in him. O man of God, said the woman to Elijah, What have you done to me? Have you come to remind me of my iniquity and cause the death of my son? But Elijah said to her, Give me your son. So he took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his own bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, O Lord my God, have you also brought tragedy on this widow who has opened her home to me, by causing her son to die? Then he stretched himself out over the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, O Lord my God, please let this boy's life return to him. And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah, and the child's life returned to him, and he lived. Then Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper room into the house, and gave him to his mother. Look, your son is alive, Elijah declared. Then the woman said to Elijah, Now I know that you are a man of God and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is truth. After a long time, in the 3rd year of the drought, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, Go and present yourself to Ahab. And I will send rain upon the face of the earth. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. The famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of the palace. Now Obadiah greatly feared the Lord, for when Jezebel had slaughtered the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 men per cave, providing them with food and water. Then Ahab said to Obadiah, Go throughout the land to every spring and every valley. Perhaps we will find grass to keep the horses and mules alive so that we will not have to destroy any livestock. So they divided the land to explore. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went the other way by himself. Now as Obadiah went on his way, Elijah suddenly met him. When Obadiah recognized him, he fell face down and said, Is it you, my lord Elijah? It is I, he answered. Go tell your master, Elijah is here. But Obadiah replied, How have I sinned, that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to put me to death? As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord has not sent someone to search for you. When they said, He is not here, he made that kingdom or nation swear that they had not found you. And now you say, Go tell your master that Elijah is here. I do not know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you off when I leave you. Then when I go and tell Ahab and he does not find you, he will kill me. But I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. Was it not reported to my Lord what I did when Jezebel slaughtered the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 prophets of the Lord, 50 men per cave, and I provided them with food and water. And now you say, Go tell your Lord that Elijah is here. He will kill me. Then Elijah said, As surely as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will present myself to Ahab today. So Obadiah went to inform Ahab, who went to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw Elijah, he said to him, Is that you, O troubler of Israel. I have not troubled Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's house have, for you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and have followed the Baals. Now summon all Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab summoned all the Israelites and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Then Elijah approached all the people and said, How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people did not answer a word. Then Elijah said to the people, I am the only remaining prophet of the Lord, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let the prophets of Baal choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it into pieces, and place it on the wood but not light the fire. And I will prepare the other bull and place it on the wood but not light the fire. Then you may call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, What you say is good. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, Since you are so numerous, choose for yourselves 1 bull and prepare it first. Then call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. And they took the bull that was given them, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, shouting, O Baal, answer us. But there was no sound, and no one answered as they leaped around the altar they had made. At noon Elijah began to taunt them, saying, Shout louder, for he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or occupied, or on a journey. Perhaps he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and cut themselves with knives and lances, as was their custom, until the blood gushed over them. Midday passed, and they kept on raving until the time of the evening sacrifice. But there was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, Come near to me. So all the people approached him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. And Elijah took 12 stones, 1 for each tribe of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come and said, Israel shall be your name. And with the stones, Elijah built an altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench around the altar large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. Next, he arranged the wood, cut up the bull, placed it on the wood, and said, Fill 4 water pots and pour the water on the offering and on the wood. Do it a second time, he said, and they did it a second time. Do it a third time, he said, and they did it a third time. So the water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet approached the altar and said, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord. Answer me, so that this people will know that you, the Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell face down and said, The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. Then Elijah ordered them, Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let a single one escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Kishon valley and slaughtered them there. And Elijah said to Ahab, Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink. But Elijah climbed to the summit of Carmel, bent down on the ground, and put his face between his knees. Go and look toward the sea, he said to his servant. So the servant went and looked, and he said, There is nothing there. 7 times Elijah said, Go back. On the 7th time the servant reported, There is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea. And Elijah replied, Go and tell Ahab. Prepare your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. Meanwhile, the sky grew dark with clouds and wind, and a heavy rain began to fall. So Ahab rode away and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord came upon Elijah, and he tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. Luke 22 verses 47 to 71. While he was still speaking, a crowd arrived, led by the man called Judas, one of the 12. He approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus asked him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Those around Jesus saw what was about to happen and said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, No more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, temple officers, and elders who had come for him, "Have you come out with swords and clubs as you would against an outlaw? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this hour belongs to you and to the power of darkness." Then they seized Jesus, led him away, and took him into the house of the high priest. And Peter followed at a distance. When those present had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. A servant girl saw him seated in the firelight and looked intently at him. "This man also was with him," she said. But Peter denied it. "Woman, I do not know him," he said. A short time later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." About an hour later, another man insisted, "Certainly this man was with him, for he too is a Galilean." "Man, I do not know what you are talking about," Peter replied. While he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word that the Lord had spoken to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. The men who were holding Jesus began to mock him and beat him. They blindfolded him and kept demanding, "Prophesy. Who hit you?" And they said many other blasphemous things against him. At daybreak the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and scribes, met together. They led Jesus into their Sanhedrin and said, "If you are the Christ, tell us." Jesus answered, "If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask you a question, you will not answer. But from now on the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." So they all asked, "Are you then the Son of God?" He replied, "You say that I am. Why do we need any more testimony?" They declared, "We have heard it for ourselves from his own lips."